And thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Zach Allison with ATS. I'm our National Accounts Manager. And one of my lovely duties is to host our semi-weekly, bi-weekly, it's more like 2.5 a month, so it's hard to find a good cadence to explain. But we host our ATS University series. Our ATS University series is where we try to, similar to a lunch and learn you might have at your firm's office, we try to assist everyone in getting their design credits that they need for the year and also focus on education. So we could be covering a topic from as wide ranging as software or how to write specs to as detailed into how to size a water heater to the intricacies of barrier-free design, which we do a lot of. If you're unfamiliar with ATS and this is your first ATS University, thank you for joining us. ATS general concept, we're about trying to get the right product in the right place. And we have software that helps you select that product and configure that product to put it into your jobs. I'll show you a little bit later in the hour how you can find any of the products that we're talking about today. One of the important parts of the ATS platform is that when you select your region, it will help you select your right barrier-free products. And with that, we try to really focus on education surrounding these barrier-free products, which is why we have our lovely manufacturers and our partners. ATS is a free design service for those in the design community, and it's paid for by our manufacturers, like the Dobbin Sales and Sloan team, of which we have Pierce here today. Pierce, welcome to the team. I know you're coming up on, are you coming up on a year yet?
Just about, not quite, but
Yeah.
obviously long-standing here with Dobbin Sales and the brands. So there's plenty of great knowledge that we can impart onto the group, and
Oh,
looking
nice.
forward to it.
You've been in a heavy training montage, learning everything you can about barrier-free code across all across Canada.
Absolutely, it's a loaded subject and changing oftentimes by the month. So keeping our finger on the pulse of the evolution of it is really important, and we're shaping really impactful spaces for users. So really, we're excited about it.
Awesome. Well, so a couple of final pieces of housekeeping. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have questions along the way, pop them in. I'll raise them up to Pierce when he has a breath to take in between slides. And then one final bit for the ASPE accreditation and AIA accreditation. Is it a self-reporting Pierce, or do you need to get the list and we'll send it over to you and you register them?
Yep, I'll send you a list. We'll capture everyone's email on there and then your number, and then we'll submit it for credit for you.
Perfect. So our team will reach out to get any sort of numbers that you might need. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you for joining us, Pierce. With that, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, guys, we're gonna jump into the CEU. You've all done CEUs in the past, so you know that it is for the most part devoid of brand and product centric information. So we'll jump into it. There is a bit of a script that we follow as required for CEU sessions, but by all means, pipe up with some questions in the chat at any point, and we'll answer them as they come up, or we can do it at the end as well. Um, let's jump into it. Welcome to Considerations for Accessible and Inclusive Design in Commercial Restrooms, presented by Sloan. As we move into a more hygiene-focused world, washroom visitors will expect clean, updated spaces that feel welcoming and safe. At the same time, barrier-free, accessible, and inclusive design is putting a greater emphasis on optimizing the planning of commercial washrooms so that they're safe, comfortable, and easy for all occupants to use. This course will discuss accessible and inclusive design considerations in commercial washrooms, including a short history of the Canadian accessibility legislation, plumbing innovations that enable accessibility compliance and inclusive design, and options for retrofitting existing restrooms for accessibility. After taking this course, you should be able to, one, examine the history of ADA and inclusive design, including the evolution of design awareness in the commercial restroom space and its implications in Canada, of course. Review implications of the American with Disabilities Act on commercial restroom design and plumbing product specification and the Canadian counterparts. And three, explore innovations that allow this ADA compliance and inclusive design in commercial restrooms. So Sloan sponsors this program and is a registered provider with the American Institute of Architects Continuing Education System, AIA-CES. And credits earned on completion of this program will be reported to the AIA-CES for AIA members and parallel groups as well. Certificates of completion are available for self-reporting and record-keeping needs upon completion of the program. In this program, is registered with the AIA-CES for continuing professional education. As such, it does not include content that may be deemed or construed to be an approval or endorsement by the AIA of any materials or construction or any method or manner of handling, using, distributing, or dealing in any materials or products. So this is your big disclaimer before we get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So let's get started. The first learning objective here. Let's examine the history of accessibility and inclusive design, including the evolution of design awareness in the commercial restroom space, specifically AODA. The shift towards hygiene awareness has driven visitors to expect clean and updated spaces that feel welcoming and safe. Those washrooms should be safe and comfortable for all users and not the binary world of male-female adults. Washroom Washrooms can help promote mental and emotional well-being, and they create a sense of belonging. So what do we mean by inclusive design? Are we talking about creating spaces for those with different cultural practices or those with specific physical abilities? Or pardon me, are we designing, pardon me, are we designing for the visually impaired or families? Or is it to ensure safety for all users regardless of gender expression or special privacy needs? The answer is yes, all of that and more. In 1990, CSA B651 is issued in Canada to address accessibility concurrent with ADA legislation in the United States, but it is not law or legislation. Then, later in 1994, Ontarians with Disabilities Committee forms and begins aggressively lobbying government for change. Just a little bit after that, in 2001, Ontarians with Disabilities Act passes, and it's a weaker precursor to our present legislation. Now, between the years of 2001 and 2005, other provinces adopt similar legislation. And at the end of that period, in 2005, a truly comprehensive act passes, known as the AODA. And this addresses broader topics than just physical accessibility, access to information, public services, and even web pages. And then in 2023, the latest CSA B651-23 is issued, which aligns closely to the NBC and offers a path to accessible building design. When you guys look back at the history of accessibility legislation in Canada, I think that we can all agree that it was in relatively recent history where all of these big strides were made. And so it is important to note that this is a changing landscape. And that's what I was alluding to when I said it changes month by month. There's new innovations, there's new legislation, there's new ideas from the design architecture side that are feeding into the accessibility legislation. Canadian accessibility legislation landscape. So there's two pictures here. Let's see if I can get them both up. Three of them. The legal landscape of accessibility in Canada is a challenging mixed bag. With provinces holding the responsibility for building and zoning, they're also responsible for accessibility legislation. But there are also federally regulated buildings and others subject to local municipal standards. Federally regulated buildings, government buildings, airports, rail, marine, etc. And here's just a quick synopsis of how those are categorized. When it comes to the evolution of inclusive design, over the past decade, society has had the chance to rethink discrimination with growing social awareness of gender identity, differently abled individuals, and sensory sensitivity. While discrimination based on sex is prohibited and sensory sensitivity could technically fall under AODA, Remember that AODA does not explicitly name all covered impairments. There are gray areas that must be addressed. The public restroom is one space that has come under intense fire during this social evolution. A growing number of people identify with a gender that they were not assigned at birth, and confusion has arisen as to which restroom they should use. Public restrooms can also be very overwhelming for those with sensory processing disorders or other forms of auditory, tactile, and visual sensitivity, including sensitivity to colors, lights, and patterns. Loud hand dryers, flushing toilets, and paper towel dispensers, bright lights, and general noise in the restroom can also induce anxiety. When it comes to the evolution of inclusive design, we can see that in 2005, approximately, breastfeeding in spaces became a hot topic. In 2014, gender-neutral design started to become more prominent and at the forefront of discussion. In 2017, gender expression was added to the Ontario Human Rights Code, which is a major milestone. And in 2019, CSA B651, which we're all familiar with, includes provisions for gender neutral designs, and that's for federally governed projects. Designers lead the charge. Each of these scenarios and many more helped evolve inclusive design in the commercial restroom. Although these laws apply only to specific scenarios, the hope is that they set the groundwork for all facilities to provide more barrier-free, inclusive options, and for designers to lead the charge in normalizing these accommodations. In an extensive study regarding restroom access for transgendered people and the historical precedents for segregated washrooms, architecture firm Gensler discovered that restroom access goes far beyond the transgender community, affecting nearly everyone: parents, caregivers, private people, people with disability, and people with special medical needs, among others. Now, restrooms remain one of the few gender segregated spaces in our built environment. Evolution in gender expression has challenged this past practice and has forced washroom design to evolve to address this. Othering individuals by creating separate facilities may seem to address this issue at first, but in reality, it only serves to segregate them into special categories. Washrooms can be designed in such a way to treat all users equally instead of segregating a particular group of persons. So take a look at this example here on the screen. Uh, in the blue box, I believe it is. Except as permitted by sentence 2, water closets shall be provided for each sex, assuming that the occupant load is equally divided between males and females, unless the proportion of each sex expected in the building can be determined with reasonable accuracy. What this shows, and this is a direct quote, is that the National Building Code of Canada lags behind on this matter, still dividing washrooms by sex. There is a provision for single universal washrooms, but no building-wide application for gender-neutral facilities. And it also shows that there is a proposed change. And so for in 2022, to allow for washroom to be sized for total occupants regardless of gender. All of this, all of this underlines the importance that designers play in the creation of an accessible washroom and the interpretation of the accessibility code. Okay, so moving on to learning objective 2, and that's diving into the common approaches for inclusive washroom design. And there is a little video within this section that I hope plays with audio. So I'll ask you guys to give me a thumbs up if you do hear the audio when it comes through. So the stalled project. For further research into history and subject of inclusive restroom design, consider looking into the Stalled Project, which takes as its point of departure national debates surrounding transgender access to public restrooms to address an urgent social justice issue: the need to create safe, sustainable, and inclusive public restrooms for everyone, regardless of age, gender, race, religion, and disability. And I'll make sure that this link gets sent out to the group afterward because it is a fantastic program and group that just focuses on washroom accessibility. So I'll make sure you get that. So let's see if this video launches. Give me a thumbs up emoji if you do hear it, because I want to make sure everyone can hear it correctly.
Stoll takes current controversies about transgender access to public bathrooms as a point of departure to address the design consequences of creating safe, inclusive restrooms for everyone, irrespective of age, gender, religion, and disability.
This is not the first time that bathrooms have become an issue. At different moments in U.S. history, the public bathroom has registered social anxieties triggered by the threat of previously marginalized groups moving into mainstream society. Milestones include the creation of the ladies' room as more women entered the paid workforce in the 1880s, the fight to abolish colored bathrooms during the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, the fear of being infected with HIV by sharing restrooms with gay men during the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, and the disability rights movement's demand for accessible restrooms that led to the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. The transgender bathroom debates is just the latest episode in this long history. Both sides frame the issue as a matter of safety. Opponents falsely characterize trans women as predatory men, masquerading in dresses to stalk women and girls in the ladies' room, while trans advocates point to statistics that show how trans people, trans women of color in particular, are the likelier victims of restroom violence. What's threatening about trans people is that they call into question the idea that one's gender is determined by anatomy. Trans, non-binary, intersex, and other gender non-conforming people demonstrate that there are many ways of expressing one's gender independent from biological sex that don't conform to the binary of sex-segregated bathrooms.
The most common approach to the all-gender restroom is the single-user solution. This consists of a single-occupancy, ADA-compliant bathroom labeled gender-neutral. This approach stigmatizes not only trans and gender nonconforming people, but also people with disabilities by separating them from others. Stoll advocates an alternative, the multi-user solution, which treats the restroom as a single open space, replacing the typical stalls whose revealing gaps compromise privacy with floor-to-ceiling partitions and communal areas for washing and grooming. We've developed a process for retrofitting sex-segregated restrooms that takes the multi-user approach a step further. First, we remove the plumbing stack wall and treat the bathroom as one open space. We then eliminate the corridor wall, treating the bathroom as a porous extension of the hallway. We add 3 different types of fully enclosed stalls, standard, ambulatory, and ADA, as well as caregiving rooms, which include sinks and changing tables. We add communal grooming and washing stations off the circulation path, and finally a lounge that transforms the corridor into an animated social space. This solution has 3 advantages. Restroom users can visually monitor one another, reducing the risk of violence. Gender nonconforming people aren't stuck between 2 options that don't align with their identities. And it meets the needs of the trans community, as well as a wide range of differently embodied people, including caregivers, the elderly, mothers, Muslims, and people with disabilities. Stoll has also developed a prototype for high-traffic spaces like airports that reimagine the restroom as an open precinct animated by 3 activity zones: grooming, washing, and eliminating. We're promoting inclusive restrooms through 3 initiatives. We've compiled our research into an open source website accessible to designers, students, cultural institutions, and municipalities. Stoll team member Terry Kogan is spearheading our initiative to amend the International Plumbing Code to make the multi-user solution code compliant. And through lectures, workshops, and publications, we're raising awareness that bathrooms are but one example of the need to create inclusive public spaces that allow a broad range of people to productively mix. To learn more about Stoll, please visit our website.
Okay, so yeah, definitely take a look at that website. They've got a lot of great reading materials and links to them on that site. Some really bright minds. Obviously, they're just focused on making accessible washrooms and really rethinking it from a number of different perspectives and angles. Let's go on to providing proximity, privacy, and cleanliness for inclusive designs. Single occupancy solutions are ideal to maximize privacy By single occupancy, we mean the toilet and the lavatory complete in one room. When they're not feasible, other measures can be incorporated to ensure privacy. Ambient noise or music can be used, floor-to-ceiling stall doors, and of course, visual indicators for stall occupancy. Standalone single occupancy washrooms are by far the most common track taken, especially in situations. They provide benefits like added safety and create truly private space for the users. They are popular with families and allow for users who may need the space for longer periods of time, like in the case of when adult change tables are needed. This option provides a simple solution to code compliance, but also comes with its challenges. Having a universal washroom option could create othering effects, like we talked about, depending on the unique needs of the population it serves. The best example of these washrooms can be seen in many K through 12 education facilities where staff washrooms are being converted to now being labeled universal washrooms. As we saw in the stalled video, this is their recommendation for an approach that is more inclusive. Let's move the lavatory into the stall. Let's create greater privacy and make inclusive spaces for all users. This model does come with added considerations like lighting and lock indicators and individual ventilation and cleanliness implications, especially in cases where urinals are not installed. But in some scenarios, like nightclubs or co-ed student housing, however, this model may also create added safety concerns that should be discussed relative to the project. Suffice to say that there's no one size fits all for every project. There's a lot of unique user needs that we have to incorporate into our washroom designs. Now, in most cases, single user washroom can be implemented and created. It can be implemented and create a space savings. This is especially true because of the large access areas that are needed for wheelchair users. Take, for instance, this example on the left. In a traditional washroom space occupying 452 square feet, which delivers fixtures for 8 people, including entry, the revised single-user model frees up space, only using 338 square feet. This allows the washroom to retain the spaces for 8 users, just the same, without sacrificing accessible walls, or accessible stalls. In the less traditional option on the far right, you will see a layout that uses the least amount of space, coming in at 335.5 square feet. This leverages the single occupancy washroom model, which still houses room for 8 stalls, but can convert 4 of them to accessible stalls. So that's 2 more than the previous layout, providing even greater value at lower square footage. When it comes to the hybrid solution, the model that we see more and more is known as the hybrid solution. It features single user option aside gender segregated facilities, but with shared sinks. It has floor to ceiling multi-stalls and provide privacy for all users and are available for all genders. With multiple users, it helps to address safety concerns, and it can also be argued that it helps to deliver collective community by reducing othering effects. Will this be the hybrid future of the washroom in educational facilities, perhaps? The example shown in the stalled project video is the best example that we can show you for this hybrid model. Here is a side-by-side comparison of the traditional washroom next to the stalled hybrid solution model. And here's a detailed view of the stalled proposed layout. There is a single bank of sinks and wash stations at one end, shared, and it allows for traffic flow, private secure spaces, and frees up space for seating areas, which is what that corridor adjacent space is. Now, retrofits into high traffic spaces like airports is a great application case for this model as well. However, it does come with cost consideration when moving the pipe chase. It too can be expanded to extend applications like uh, recreating, or sorry, pardon me, extending applications to recreation or civic centers, as well as transportation hubs. And there are designated roads for washing, grooming, and eliminated. Again, from that video, and this creates a center for care and hygiene as well, leaving spaces for care of users of all ages and needs. So when it comes to providing proximity, privacy, and cleanliness for inclusive design, we live in an era of changing cultural norms, and providing these options is an excellent way for facilities to get ahead of changing times. No matter what strategy is used, inclusive restroom design should be built in from the beginning, providing proactive accommodation rather than waiting for issues to arise. Now, forward-thinking businesses and organizations that value inclusion will be the change agents rather than the policy, and designers can help in this effort by facilitating discussions with clients and building occupants. This will help ensure that the evolution of restroom design moves towards a safer and a more comfortable environment for everyone. Okay, so that was learning objective number two. Fantastic dive into creative space use for washroom layout, making accessible washroom design. And now let's review the implications of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is known as ADA, of course, on the commercial restroom design and plumbing product specification in Canada specifically.
And just before we dive into that, there's a couple of
Yeah,
points that came up on that last section. One, maybe uh, someone was asking for the link to the video. What we can do is I'll make sure that we get that link. If you can send me the link after via email, I'll make sure that
definitely.
our team includes it when we send out these certificates.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure you guys get the link. It is a fantastic group, and some of the brightest minds coming out of Yale University architecture are spearheading it. So absolutely, we'll make sure that everyone receives that link.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Like, obviously, we've seen a transition period here over the last few years, different iterations of that kind of group hand washing or group labs, multi-users areas, and it's interesting to see like what they call the community space as well. I thought that was a very interesting aspect, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of the fear around privacy or fear around kind of issues happening in the space.
Hmm.
Visibility is the same reason that you have lights in parks, right?
Hmm.
Visibility minimizes issues. So that was an interesting perspective.
Definitely.
One of the challenges that I think you mentioned and was highlighted in the chat is around exhaust. Obviously, there's a significant impact on your exhaust for these. So your ventilation per stall does increase because you need a certain number of air exchanges within that stall area. And that's something that, yeah, has to be included in your design. So I'm curious to see how those architectural teams um, got around the challenge of the ventilation.
For sure. Well, there's a lot of mechanical and also let's be honest, cost implications of pivoting to new washroom models. I mean, the very fact that now we're putting a washroom, let's say single occupancy, we're putting a sink, lavatory, faucet, hand dryer in every single stall. There are major cost implications for that, and
Yeah.
one of the biggest parts is that ventilation, is the individual lighting as well and drainage too, right? Because in all commercial washrooms, if we're doing floor to ceiling walls, we need to have drainage in the floors for each of those units. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of things that we still need to solve for
Yeah.
and account for. And so that's why I think when the video is talking about working with the client directly, having really honest conversation about what the actual users of the space will what their experience will be and what their needs will be is very important. For the longest time, the commercial washroom was kind of just an afterthought. It was kind of prescribed the same as we did in the last project. But now it's really a fast changing sector, and the sociological implications of the commercial washroom are huge, as was illustrated. Um, right now, even though the discussion about transgendered individuals is perhaps one of the hottest topics in the commercial or institutional washroom, the next thing that probably will be working its way into our legislation is going to be the awareness and implementation of anti-ligature options. So just for added safety against self-harm. And then shortly after that, maybe even before that, actually, we're going to see a lot more legislation and discussion around anti-human trafficking measures and how we can solve that in a washroom, because that is apparently one of the hottest areas where those types of crimes are being committed, because it's kind of this private space that no one's monitoring. So um, it is exciting that we are finally talking about some really major topics, and that everyone from the end client to their users, including designers and architects, are really getting into finding solutions and coming up with unique solutions and not just relying on the legislation.
Well, I think your one of your early slides highlighted, like, sure, there's been a lot of talk around the transgender side, but that initial universal slide, it's not just one segment, it's all of these different segments. Nowadays you're seeing the spatial reconstruction of the washroom, just simply because now you have to provide space for adult change tables, which was not
Mhm,
before. Those special needs change tables take up a lot of space and take up the footprint in the washroom. You also
mhm,
have lead challenges, as when you go over to um, toilet only design and minimize your impact of urinals. Urinals provide us a great amount of low flow savings,
mhm,
and the percentage savings of a ultra low flow urinal versus an ultra low flow toilet helps you meet those percentages that you need for lead. So that's going to
mhm.
be another impact as well that has become a challenge.
Definitely. We love urinals for a couple different reasons. They absolutely cut down on water flow. Oftentimes now the super high efficiency ones are using 475 milliliters per flush. And there's also hybrid or zero water urinals available.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic options. And when you look at lead and well projects, the urinals is really a great spot where you can secure like 4 credits pretty easily by finding some good highly efficient
Benchmarks, right?
urinals. Yeah, it's a great spot where you should look if you're trying to save water. Look to the urinals first. Let's look at the water closets and toilets and faucets afterward. So, you good point. Absolutely, we love the washrooms, and also washrooms that don't have urinals are also typically way dirtier and require way more maintenance and cleaning. So we do like urinals.
Well, and you think of that sort of layout in a high traffic environment like a airport or something, working in the design to include a handful of urinals, like a similar to, they had that little special area. You could have an area like that off to the side that's just a bank of urinals that
Mhm,
they then go to the hand washing in. That would be a great way to increase traffic,
mhm.
minimize lines, and still have that amount of privacy. But we're gonna go well beyond if we keep talking
Oh
forever.
yeah,
We'll
let's keep going.
dive back in.
It's a great subject. The commercial washroom, there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of important people. And the one thing I'll remind everyone is that access to a safe and secure and hygienic washroom is a basic human right. It doesn't matter who you are, what kind of background you come from, or your individual needs, you have a right to access it. So as a group, as a community, as an industry, we have to push towards that. Okay, let's get into learning objective number 3, which is reviewing the implications of the ADA and with regards to the plumbing product specification in Canada. Now, this learning objective gets into some pretty fine detail on placement and such. No expectation that anyone's going to memorize it because it is, of course, documented in CSA P651. So, the Americans with Disabilities Act has many implications for designing and specifying products for commercial restrooms. First, let's explore how ADA standards apply to plumbing products. We've already talked about layout, so now let's get into restroom fixtures such as toilets, urinals, grab bars, and lavatories. And of course, we'll approach this discussion with the National Building Code of Canada standard in mind, with occasional comments on provincial variations. Grab bars. So when we first enter an accessible washroom, grab bars are one of the first things that catches our eyes. Grab bar heights are measured to the midline of the gripping surface, as opposed to other fixtures, which is usually at the top or the bottom point. And so when ranges in heights are provided, attention should be given to the optimal product for compliance. Now, grab bars are required behind and to the sides of water closets, and fold down bars are used when the side wall cannot be reached. And so all of these bars have to be A, slip resistant, B, have a diameter between 30 and 40 millimeters, and be able to resist a load not less than 1.3 kilonewtons applied vertically or horizontally. Typically, what you find during specification is a grab bar will say it's ADA compliant. You do have to double check sometimes to ensure that all these elements are being met by the individual product. And then, of course, where it's mounted on the wall, it has to have a clearance of 35 to 45 millimeters from the wall. So so you can allow your hand to get in there, even for individuals who have gripping challenges. And then I'll also note that 1.3 kilonewtons, which is that load resistance, that's approximately 293 pounds. So these have to be highly robust, well secured grab bars that are secured to the wall for that purpose. Now, I'll also note that CSAB 651, the federally accessibility standard, introduces color contrasting features. So keep an eye out for that. And there is a calculation for visual difference. So keep an eye out in the code for what it means to be visually different. When it comes to the rear grab bar placement, plumbing product manufacturers almost always recommend choosing the maximum height limit for placement of the grab bar, which is 36 inches. And this is a great pro tip, as it will make meeting the proximity requirements for the other fixtures and accessories much easier. So start with the maximum height for the rear grab bar, and everything then kind of flows from that. The rear grab bars must be a minimum of 600 millimeters long per horizontal and be centered on the toilet bowl. And rear grab bars must be at the same height as the side horizontal grab bars too. And where there is no tank, a backrest support is required. To satisfy this, you can also use a toilet lid. Toilet lid will also act as a backrest. So again, just to reiterate, when you do your back grab bars, put them at the maximum height, and then the side grab bars will match, which will leave you lots of space on that wall for toilet paper dispensers, etc. Not shown here is the scenario where the flush valve interferes with the grab bar. And in this instance, it is acceptable to split the rear grab bars and put one on either side. Or if you are also specifying the flush valve, you can choose one with a remote sensor location. So we can position it in an optimal spot so it's not interfering with the grab bars. For the side grab bars, they must be L-shaped. And they must contain a vertical and horizontal component, and they have to be 760 millimeters in length. Sorry, the horizontal component must be no less than 850 millimeters above the floor. So again, we start with the back bar, and this one then becomes parallel if they're positioned correctly. And the vertical component must be placed within 150 millimeters of the toilet's leading front edge so that it is easily reachable by the user. Next, we look at toilets and transfer space. So toilet transfer space is extremely important to the design of accessible washrooms too. You need a space that is at least 900 millimeters by 1500 millimeters next to the toilet, so beside the toilet, and should be measured at least 460 to 480 millimeters from the sidewall to provide clearance for other peripheral elements like shelves and hooks. So this is an essential element to the accessible washroom right now. And we mentioned that the back supports are necessary when no lid is present, but when it comes to flush controls, there actually are specific requirements too. So the flush valves must be automatically activated or hand operated by a mechanism that can be activated with a closed fist, with no tight grasp, and in a way that does not require any more than 22 newtons of force. So that's five pounds of force. For manual flush valves, they must have an actuation on the same side of the toilet as the transfer space. And so in these cases, we see greater desire for automatic flush valves, that is, sensor activated flush valves, to simplify the specification process. Similarly, touchless flush valves obviously have very obvious hygiene benefits too. So just to summarize that, if we can go with a sensor operated flush valve, we don't have to worry about what side a lever is on because obviously it's a sensor or a push button typically. When it comes to toilet paper dispensers, there are strict requirements and they must be below the horizontal side grab bar and must be between 600 and 800 millimeters from the floor. They also need to be no further than 300 millimeters from the toilet side edge. I think that we've all been in washrooms where the placement of grab bars was not optimal, and because of that, the toilet paper dispenser is like way down, way down near the floor. We've all encountered that, and so that's why we follow that best practice rule of putting the rear grab bar at the maximum height, and then the side grab bars follow, and then toilet paper, etc., follows after that. And here's actually a nice little visual of the side view of the toilet showing the max and the min heights for the toilet seat itself and for the flush valve. Actually, going back, this image also shows that remote sensor for the flush valve, even though it does appear as though it's a manual flush valve. Above the handle, there is a remote sensor. Now, when it comes to urinals, urinal mounting has specific requirements too, and they have some similarities to toilets. The top edge of the rim must be no more than 430 millimeters from the floor, and the upper rim cannot be lower than 860 millimeters. The activation of the urinal flush valve follows the same requirements as we had for the toilet. That is, they must be automatically activated or be hand activated and require no more than 5 pounds of pressure to activate it with a closed fist. It must also be located between 900 and 1100 millimeters from the floor. That's the activation. By now, you guys should be starting to see the similar themes in the placement heights and the activation requirements. And of course, the argument for automatic sensor activated flush valves is becoming stronger.
Just one thing before we go too far into urinals.
Yeah.
It's a comment that came up on backrests and flush valves.
Mhm.
And this is a good one to address because it does come up very regularly.
Mhm.
Um, Essentially, there's a significant difference between the spud location on a floor-mounted urinal or floor-mounted toilet and a wall-mounted toilet.
Mhm.
And it's very important to double check the distance from that spud location to your wall. There are some manufacturers that have differentiating models for these two types of spud locations.
Mhm.
And then there are some manufacturers that have come out with just a singular backrest that they try to put everywhere. If you go with a manufacturer that has a singular backrest that they just try to put everywhere, you will have conflicts with spud location. And, for example, your seat might not be able to stay in the upright position. So those are important points to double check. Thank you to the anonymous attendee that rose that up for us. But yeah, very worthwhile double checking, and I'll show you how that's ruled on our system down the line as well.
Yeah, good point. Just the fact that there is a backrest specified is not sufficient to satisfy the code and make sure that actually everything plays nicely together. Um, Seats, covers, backrests, shelves, those things often get pushed off to the very final stage, which isn't wrong, but just making sure we're not copying and pasting from the past projects is really important so that we know all those parts play together.
Yeah,
And I
even
would
the
say,
hinges,
pardon me?
wildly, even the hinges.
Yes,
Having
yeah.
a self-sustaining check hinge that prevents the seat from falling and slamming shut is an important part for specific applications.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, those of us that nerd out on commercial and washroom applications, happy to talk about these things, although they might seem inconsequential early in the project, but really they are worth noting very quickly, keeping in mind that your end client's experience and their tenants and their building users, they will leave the washroom with very strong opinions about how easy it is to use. And so we want to make sure that that experience is positive right off the bat. The commercial washroom, institutional washroom polarizes people about their experience. So let's get it right the first time, and by having a relatively quick conversation and finding solutions like that. You're absolutely right. Let's go here. Where am I? Urinal clear space. So grab bars must be no more than 380 millimeters from the center line of the urinal, and there must be a clear space in front of the urinal that meets the 820 by 1390 millimeters in dimension. And so please also take note that one of the unique changes to the CSA B651-23 standard includes the need for a color contrasting indicator center line on the wall in front of the urinal. And this is for vision impaired or for those with vestibular challenges or other neurological conditions. Depending on your washroom design, a um, a sensor can also act as a contrasting color indicator because oftentimes they are black in color, and so that can also work. But if designers are choosing to have a specific tile color or other accessory to provide that center point is a really great way of integrating it as well. For the grab bars around urinals, similarly to the ones around toilets, they have to be slip resistant, usually with a knurled finish. Sometimes they accept peen finishes, and have diameter between 30 and 40 millimeters. And of course have to be able to resist a load of not less than 1.3 kilonewtons applied vertically or horizontally. And also similarly that once mounted on the wall, they have to have that same clearance, right? So you can get your hand around it of 35 to 45 millimeters. And then with regards to exposed flushometers or flush valves, to resolve conflicts between the rear grab bar and the required location of the exposed flushometer, the grab bar must be split or shifted, as we talked about earlier. And this is permitted only where the applicable codes mandate flush controls in such a location. So now, keep in mind, automatic motion activated flushometers are not required to be on the open side of the of the water closet that we spoke about earlier. And so this is just another, check box or check in the box for sensor flushometers. When it comes to concealed flushometer and sensor solutions, it is a solution that ticks all the boxes when it comes to the concealed flushometer with recessed panels that are considered to be flush with the wall and therefore do not have any clearances that need to be met. This means they can be located behind the grab bar and still meet ADA compliance. This also leaves fewer exposed elements, meaning fewer concerns for vandalism and also fewer surfaces to clean and maintain. When possible, of course, a concealed flushometer is preferred by many. And this is actually one of the first mentions in this session about vandalism. Beyond performance and serviceability, vandalism is a major, major concern for commercial washrooms. There is a lot going on in a washroom. It is an essential space, and so ensuring that it is constantly available and usable by tenants and building users is important. Vandalism is a major concern, and so keeping that in mind is important. You guys are starting to see that for every single major fixture in the accessible washroom, there are complex requirements, and they often overlap with those of other fixtures in the space. And this can be confusing, but with practice, it comes relatively quickly. So just briefly before we finish up, we're going to talk about lavatories. The lavatory placement required for accessible washroom requires a 460 millimeter distance to the center line from the wall to offer stability as needed and offer visual cues for balance. And you can see that in the image there where the little red arrow is just pointing the proximity to the side wall. Wheelchair clear floor space directly in front of the fixture must be at least 920 by 1370 millimeters deep. And only 500 millimeters of that can actually be underneath of the lavatory. And that's just speaking to the clearance space. Clear floor space under the lavatory must be a minimum of 430 millimeters, and lavatory or counter surface must not be higher than 865 above the finished floor. And fixtures must, of course, be included, or must include knee and toe clearances, which we'll get into in the next slide here, really briefly. Exposed pipes also, take note, these must be covered or insulated to prevent injury. And there's a lot of great products that are out there. Sometimes they're shrouds, sometimes they're padding. There are a number of solutions that we can integrate, or sometimes they're just enclosures. So here is more on the lavatory clearances. This diagram shows the clear space as well as the lavatory position we just talked about. So the heights of the lavatory placement is when it gets even more technical. So this diagram below shows the knee clearance that we will get into 735 millimeters at the front leading edge, sloping to a minimum of 685 millimeters at 200 millimeters closer to the wall. So we move in 200 millimeters closer to the wall, and it has to be 685. And a toe clearance of 230 millimeters is shown here. For lavatories that have overflow shaping, which are fewer and fewer these days, we can ignore the areas that are protruding for the overflow shaping, as these are not generally full sink width. So when we have that little part on the front leading edge of the sink, that is the accommodation for the overflow, we can ignore that in the measurements. Now, when we look at NBC and CSA B651-23, they are subtly different at the front edge of a lavatory. NBC states that two knee clearance heights states the two knee clearance heights that we just mentioned, but CSA B651 provides a simplified top height and knee clearance measurement shown in the lower diagram. So other than this, the only national variation for this clearance is now in Ontario, where the larger toe size of Canadians there is accommodated. So in Ontario alone, 350 millimeters is required for toe clearance, as opposed to the 230 for the rest of the country. I have never received a finite answer as to why Ontarians require this. Some say bigger toes, but I think the best explanation is that to accommodate warmer boots in colder climates. And so this does make it's a good argument. So I'm not entirely sure the real reason, but 350 versus 230 millimeters. And of course, this particularly comes into play when the enclosure is manufactured or selected for a combination with a sink system. Now, exposed pipes and surfaces, I alluded to this already. Water supply and drain pipes under lavatories and sinks must be insulated or covered to protect against direct contact. In addition, no sharp or abrasive surfaces should be under lavatories and sinks. And so when angle brackets are used for mounting, and there's no angle brackets shown here, when they're used for mounting, the design must include a cover or element of insulation around the P-trap and water stops. So this can be a shroud, this can be padding, but most designers will meet this requirement by including an enclosure beneath the sink. And that's what this is showing here, the stainless steel enclosure underneath the sink system. And this is a really great way of providing that satisfaction to the code. But what it also does is it cuts down on vandalism, because the less a vandal can see, the less likely they are to tamper with elements. And so now we're putting pipes and control units and power supplies in the enclosure. It's a really great solution. Interestingly enough, NBC does not spell out a faucet reach standard, and it appears to be an oversight because neither does CSA B651. However, most provincial codes specify 485 millimeters for faucet reach. So, when selecting faucets, keep in mind that the sensor activated fixtures help improve user accessibility and comply with accessibility requirements, making an ideal option for accessibility compliance. They also, of course, eliminate touch points, making the washroom more hygienic and less costly to maintain. I think the number is 30% water savings when you compare a manual faucet to the pivot to a sensor faucet, which is a huge amount of water savings simply by leveraging a little bit of technology. So when it comes to accessories, and we're just getting towards the end here, when it comes to accessories in the washroom, you've guessed it, there are placement requirements for those as well. Hand dryers, wall-mounted soap dispensers, coat hooks must be lower than 1,100 millimeters from the floor so that any kind of user can reach them. And in a washroom where the counter is not provided, a shelf is required, and it cannot be any higher than 1,200 millimeters above the floor. The shelves are a sensitive subject for a lot of individuals who work on washroom design because they are rarely beautiful. And so, what we're seeing a lot of is custom sink specification that extends one portion of the countertop to account for that shelf space that is required. And this is just a great way of taking more items off of the wall, making it look less like a dog's breakfast and more like a finished design space. So this is another way that we can provide solutions with whichever manufacturer you might be working with. And then finally, with the mirrors, they can be located above countertops or lavatories, but the bottom of the mirror must be no higher than 1,000 millimeters above the finished floor. As we build out our washrooms for use by all, it is important that we maintain sensible views on the application of the code. So CSA B651-23 mentions that when it is the only mirror in an accessible washroom, tilted mirrors should not be used for consideration for all users, regardless of height. But if a washroom has both a full-length mirror and a mirror above the countertop or lavatory, only one mirror in a toilet room must comply with the standard. So again, this is the legislation and the code trying to satisfy the needs of everyone. Um, I am as a personal example, I'm not an incredibly tall individual. I'm 6'2", but oftentimes I've gone into an accessible washroom where they've put a slanted mirror on the wall, and all I can see is my own shoes because it's just at such an extreme angle. So making it accessible for everyone is important, but also keeping in mind that there's unique placement and mirror requirements by municipality as well. So the rules are always changing on you. Also make sure that the full length mirror is not mounted in a location where it reflects the route of travel. And this is in the code as well. So again, more rules to follow, but for obvious reasons, for being disorienting, etc. And that is it. That is the considerations for accessible and inclusive design in commercial washrooms. And we've covered three essential learning objectives today. And with that, hopefully, they provided in-depth understanding about the trends and the technical requirements in accessible washroom design. First, we examined the history of accessible and inclusive washroom design, and then we looked at the evolution of the design awareness in the commercial washroom space with regards to legislation. Um, we reviewed common approaches to washroom design, and then, of course, we looked at the technical implications and the product specification and placement for accessible washrooms. So that is it. I appreciate your time. I know it's a lot of information, especially in that third learning outcome where we get into 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 millimeters and different specifications for every item. So I appreciate your attention to all of this. And I will leave you with this one thought, which is there's a lot of room for interpretation in the building standards and codes. And so if we approach it with a level mind and true consideration about how our spaces can serve people, then I think that we'll all be pushing in the same direction.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. And you're right, there is a lot to cover. We've done the barrier-free design guides for all the provinces across Canada. and different presentations for different provinces. It's always one of the heaviest, most detailed to try to get through. I do appreciate everyone staying on late with us. We're always already a few minutes past, so I understand if you have to leave now. But I do want to take a couple of minutes and show how you could find some of this info even easier, even faster. If you go to atspec.com, the site that we mentioned in the beginning, where you can access these recorded presentations, also has a great learning hub and knowledge base that will have some design guides. You can get the webinar recordings for this or for our BC barrier-free code updates, the Ontario barrier-free code presentations that we've done before. They're all stored here as well. Importantly, Pierce made a great point about using current products to meet the current codes and not just cookie cuttering from one washroom to another, and asking important questions to your owner, to your designer of what are we trying to accomplish? Why do we need certain things? And I would like to reiterate that is a great decision and that our spec tool is designed to help you in those types of conversations. I cover our templates and our masters in just about every presentation that I do these days. You can access those here on your left toolbar, and I'll show you how you can access them during an individual project or quick spec very shortly. But the key purpose of them is to provide you an up-to-date current standard that then you can put into a project very quickly, edit and revise and tweak to meet whatever new needs you have for that project. That's the goal of these masters and templates. Beyond just providing you up-to-date info and notifications if a product has been discontinued, those masters also provide an ease of reference to help get a project started so that you don't fall into that habit of just from the last one, from the last one, from the last one, which does lead to change notices, does lead to conflicts on site, does lead to missing some of the barrier-free updates that have come out in recent years. One of the pieces I always mentioned in recent presentations, some of the big brands have discontinued and refined their SKU list by the hundreds over the last few years. There is definitely product that is in an old project or that is in an old master that you have not updated in a few years. There's product in there that is discontinued. I guarantee it. So if you need help with that, that is what my team is here for. If you need help translating that static document onto your live ATS account, my team will happily help you get that up to date, add all your manufacturers, and give you a starting point that you can just get push notifications on the next time something goes out of date. But let's say we wanted to take our master into a new project. We've got a high traffic washroom. We can either create a quick spec if we need a simple toilet selection, or we had that conversation about backrests. You create a quick spec called backrest. There's no additional information you need here. This is a simple product selection. That's what our system does well. You can see we've got the base model and then the wall-mounted model here. There's also one specifically designed for the Sloan CX valve. Now, how do you know when this goes together, or how do you know if it meets the barrier-free code? That's what our projects are for. Projects, which you can access again from the left toolbar here, or we can go to dashboard and hit new project again. Projects have location information. They have approximate bid dates so that we can help keep you up to date. They have applications so that we can make appropriate recommendations by application. So the application, when it's going out and where it is, allows us to apply a rule engine that helps make sure you get the barrier-free code for Ontario, for BC, for Manitoba, or Alberta, and have the appropriate building code applied to it. Now, I tend to always assume that this part of the presentation, I will be a little bit delayed. And we are here once again. So I have a barrier-free commercial washroom that I put together just before the demonstration. We've got a commercial mall, high traffic application, build dates in October. So up until the 10th of October, this project will notify you if there is a discontinuance or model number change on any of the products that you selected. So any of these products that we show here, If they have a notification that it's, at a date, then you're going to be given that heads up. I've also got a blank slate here to show you how quickly and easily it can be to make your selection. We can do this two ways. We can do this the super fast way, which is used in our masters and templates. So that your first tab would be your personal firm's masters, and then the second tab is our templates. So the ATS templates is basically ATS's recommendations or ATS masters for things like parking areas, BC housing, multi-labs. We're doing a big push on updating pipe specs. And then you've got Class A, BC offices or casinos, lead water sense applications, all sorts of different applications. You can filter down to see the ones that fit this application that you've selected. I can go into commercial master template, find either a manual, battery, or hardwired. I can get my drainage, my mechanical equipment, even snow melt. Anything you might possibly need that we have in here is available. Let's go to hardwired, and we can grab, let's say, a wall hung toilet that meets barrier free. And let's grab a barrier free basin. And then I'm just going to grab the dots, drag them over, and I'm done in a matter of seconds. Now, again, you might want to make some changes. Maybe you need to change the backrest or change the flow rate of the toilet flush valve. We could hit the pencil button, edit the flush valve to grab the new flow rate, or change the finish on our faucet. And we could hit the edit button and change this to, the new gold is always in popular now, right? Or if we need to change our finish to, the matte black versions, those are all be available in there, and you just toggle your option. And you can go from multiple different masters, multiple different templates. If we want to add the multi-labs in here, multi-labs have been a great point that was brought up in this presentation about having more and more high traffic applications. So if we need a 7-station total here, comes pre-built, all the different options we need. And again, this is going to get us into that conversation with our owner group, with our designer, to then red pen mark up and say, yes, this is what I want. No, this is not what I want. So once we're happy, we just check the boxes. We hit download spec. And we download our submittal, our schedules, our long spec. We even have brochures, which will give you nice, pretty pictures, large images, manufacturer specs, Revit files, CSI 3-part spec, all sorts of different formats. One of them is going to fit. I actually wanted to show this as well. So we mock up all of our basins to make sure they comply with the various building code standards. That's how we build our rule engine. And then if we go into our submittal format, I would imagine most people on the call likely familiar with this, probably seen this before. This is our submittal format. Then we have our brochure format. The key information, more visual oriented, and then a bulleted list of the important info. And then the manufacturer spec sheet format, which is like the exact opposite, heavily detailed spec sheets. And then if you need the written specs or schedules, we have schedules in Excel that you could simply copy and paste and put directly onto your drawings or referencing to your CAD. We have the written spec in Word, everything open and editable. So you could take the pieces that you want. Let's say we just want the fixture side and we don't need the supplies, we can take that. Or if we want the CSI 3-part spec, depending on how you write your spec. Do you go model name and number and then performance spec, or do you go performance details and then model name and number? Right? We have a detailed performance-based description. Model name and number is the CSI 3-part spec format, whereas our long spec format really just has the same info inverted to be brand and then description. And then, of course, Revit files as well. So that's the very quick overview. Hopefully that helps build an understanding of ATS and how we tie into this barrier-free discussion, giving you the ability to set your location and then apply the appropriate barrier-free rule engine based on that location. Plus the ability to build a master so you repeat work, build a live version of it that is not going to go out of date, not going to have conflicts. Set it once, and then your entire team can work off the approved info. And with our partners like Dobbin Sales and all the other manufacturers that are sponsoring our system, we'll do our best to keep that master up to date. We'll educate you on the products if you have any questions on this stuff in detail, which I know at least one person in the chat said, hey, let's have a conversation after this where they want to learn a bit more. So we'll set up that conversation, help make sure that you're comfortable, happy, and understanding all the products that we have. So thank you all for your time today. Appreciate you all reaching out. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll have a deep dive on the topic. Thank you, Pierce. Great presentation. Really
A
appreciate
pleasure.
the detailed information there. Have a great rest of the day, y'all. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.